Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first of our virtual inspection webinars. Today is, as you all know, the crawl space. And Rael Levin will be doing this 30-minute presentation. After the 30 minutes, if you have any questions along the way, go ahead and type them in the Q&A, and he can do them at the end. Rael has been with HomeProbe for over 12 years. He's been ASHI certified for 14 and has been in the construction and inspection business for even longer than that. So it's an incredible wealth of knowledge. I hope you guys learn a lot today. And like I said, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A and you can take it away, Rael.
Okay, thanks everybody for being here. I will jump right on into it, dealing with the crawl space. So here we go. All right, so in the very beginning with homes, when we see pictures of the old days, when folks had homes, they had a dirt floor and they built it with logs and trees that were cut down, and so basically that was our home. But as years moved on, the folks were raising up the homes out of the dirt and having a proper wood floor to it. And as they did that, there was a need to have access to get underneath the home to see the plumbing, and certainly in some of the homes that were in the 50s and 60s that we were inspecting, you had a floor furnace. And those were usually located on an interior hallway. It was a gravity-fed heat furnace that was gas. And the heat basically was traveling by its own power to the rooms, again, on the interior walls. And if you looked at some of these homes in later years, they've been converted into cold air returns for a regular HVAC system. So when the actual gas furnaces came out from the crawl space, the new type of furnace was installed there. So the whole issue was we needed to be able to get there to the systems. Here we have a picture of yours truly. I'm getting ready to go into a crawl space, so we're all covered up and ready to go. And just kind of give you an idea, many of them were built in crawl space in years gone by, and you still find some today, but it's minimal. Today, most houses tend to be built either on a concrete slab or on a full basement, certainly because now furnaces are installed in attics or in a garage. Certainly, for townhomes and for houses on a slab, those are the two locations that we would see them. So because we had crawl spaces early on, that's where the floor furnace were. They stuck down below the flooring. So again, we mentioned access to plumbing and structure was required. And then, of course, they went and had furnaces installed down below. So the minimum requirement is a 16 by 24 access from the exterior wall and 18 inches by 24 inches from the floor, through the floor from an interior of the home. And we'll show you a couple of examples of that in just a moment. So here we go with the outside. Bear in mind, somebody like me, 6'2", 235 pounds, a 16 by 24 access point is kind of small, but we're going to wiggle our way in there to the best of our ability and go on in and inspect for the items that we need to see. So what we need to see on the inside of that crawl space is, of course, any moisture intrusion. Is there mold growth? What does the foundation look like? What about the other supports? Earlier homes, there were probably originally they were actually put up on some kind of a stilt or a brick pier, and the main beams that were holding up the floor were also supported by brick piers. And so, that's how it was. And in between the brick piers, they would perhaps install some wood siding of some kind just to close up and not have it totally open from underneath. The early days, nobody had insulation underneath their floors either, but now we do. So we want to get up underneath there and have a look. Is that not only is the insulation in there, but is it installed correctly? On some of the older homes that we're seeing now, of course, we're dealing with the plumbing, and if we're dealing with cast iron or with galvanized steel piping, we want to have a look and see, is anything deteriorating in there because they're nearing the end of the life expectancy. So here we have an access, right here going in from an outside wall. You can see they've dug a little bit of an opening here. And you see on the right-hand side picture, there's a piece of plywood sitting there. They're basically going to lay this over the hole so that no rainwater will actually pour into here and flood its way into the crawl space. Many times we would have a little shed roof or some kind of protection right here in order to get into the crawl. Other methods would be like, how about this one? Right in the middle of the hallway, you can see the hardwood floors right here, and they've cut them in order to be able to lift out this little trapdoor. And here we are going down into this crawl space. And as you can see, it is pretty tight. We've got our Tyvek suit on right here. Another one would be, how about on the outside, where they built a deck over the place where the actual access to the crawl space was. And here we are going in to the crawl space that way. And when you're really looking at something that low, it's more kind of not even a crawl. You consider a crawl to be on hands and knees. And this is kind of a drag through the dirt type inspection, but Home Probe's getting underneath there as best we can to locate. Our method of operation is to actually get to all four corners of that crawl space. And so we're going to do our level best to do so. And if there's something that we couldn't get to or couldn't see, then of course we would have it in a limitation. And this one's right here in a bedroom. You can see the closet back here with the clothes. Just pull that trapdoor up and in we go. So the minimum height requirement is really 24 inches between the ground. So it doesn't matter if it's the dirt or concrete, and the very bottom of the floor joist. So that is the requirement for us to access that to go through. So just bear that in mind when you have an older home perhaps, or even some of the newer construction. If it's not done to code, or if it's not done correctly, you will not have that 24-inch height. It makes it extremely difficult to get in there, specifically, to go and look at perhaps a furnace that's installed under that home. So in that case, if you're less than 24 inches and you have a furnace in there with all of the ductwork that's going to run through there to provide that HVAC into the home on that ground floor, it's extremely difficult to do so. So here we are underneath in the crawl space. And so you can look at this right here. We see we've got a vapor barrier, which is something that we would be checking for, because even though you might not have a leak going on in your basement, the soil does get damp. And when the soil holds that dampness, and then as the warmth in that crawl space is there, that moisture will come on out and cause a lot of mold growth inside there. So we can actually see in this case, if you look at these bricks carefully, they're kind of darkened out, which would give us a hint that there's probably some moisture along this wall. So when I look at the rest of this, we see we've got a cement block support right here, a pier, and then there's an opening. And the opening goes through to an addition that was added on later. And this was the only way to see what was going on under that addition. Obviously, there's not enough room to ever get underneath there, but it's certainly we'd be able to have a look and see perhaps if there was any termite damage, which is not really our thing to look for the termite tunnels and things. That's more of an issue for the inspectors that do wood destroying organisms. But we could certainly see through a hole this size if there was any leakage taking place, and perhaps make a recommendation that we do actually provide a bigger access for somebody to be able to get in there. Nice over here, we do see the overhead insulation, and we are looking at the actual insulation itself. You'd be surprised how many times just something simple like this, where you have the paper or the vapor barrier, is actually what we see rather than the actual insulation. The vapor barrier is supposed to be up towards the heated side of the house, or the subflooring of the home. So here we have a brick foundation, and foundations will be many things. They might be brick, they might be even wood, they might be cement block, and they might be poured cement concrete in a one solid pour. But in this particular case, we're looking at a pretty severe termite wood destroying organism tunnels right here that are going up into this, trying to attack the wood structure right here. We also do note that there is no vapor barrier on the soil right here underneath the home. Also look carefully along the bottom again, kind of darkening or moisture on the base of this foundation. So we are seeing some moisture there. So that would be something we would have to look at on the exterior, perhaps with drainage. Even something simple like extending the downspouts 6 feet away from the home would help, with this issue right here. No water on the outside of the home means no water coming in onto the inside into the basement of the crawl space. Just do bear in mind also that brick and certainly cement block or masonry block, they're porous. And so they don't hold back the water forever. Water does eventually make its way through. And so we would see, in here, we would see what we would call a white substance called efflorescence, the moisture actually showing through there, as well as the darkened brick or cement block that we'd be looking at. Yeah, so they're not all clean and dry, folks. I mean, this is a pretty common occurrence. In actual fact, when there is standing water in a crawl space, we're not required as inspectors to go in there simply because, for safety, there may be somewhere in here an electrical wire that may be submerged in the water that's active, and by getting in there, we could subject ourselves to an electrical shock. So it would be the call of the inspector whether you can actually go in there or not. But what you can see is a pretty big mess. And what we're talking about here is a masonry block foundation, and you can see how dark the moisture is showing up here on that cement block foundation. We can see a lot of the insulation has fallen out right through here, and a lot of it's installed incorrectly. You can see the vapor barrier here facing towards the dirt rather than, as I just explained, instead of looking at the actual insulation itself. So this one here, recommendation, be just to clean this whole thing out, put in a vapor barrier, and certainly address from the outside a drainage system, a rerouting of the gutters, any which way that you can get the water away from the actual foundation. If you're going to do that, you're going to stop the intrusion. So some folks do drainage with gravel and a sump pump that would be here in the crawl space area if there wasn't a way to do the excavation on the outside of the crawl space. Here's pretty bad, mold growth, as you can see right here, and it's pretty nasty. Here we are, of course, in our Tyvek suits. So here we have, even though there's a moisture barrier down here, the actual growth is pretty bad. This would all need to be cleaned up. And in the case of mold like this, or it does destroy the actual structure. So there's probably going to be some, after cleaning all of the stuff, remediating it, finding the source of that moisture and stopping it. And there was probably going to be some structural damage and some remediation of the actual structure needed here as well. So yeah, this is a situation where we've gotten a lot of water into our crawl space. And again, a masonry block foundation. And again, I mentioned getting those downspouts away would be critical. Sometimes you just have a home that doesn't even have any gutters on it at all. And installation of gutters, would probably remediate some of this stuff right away. And this is what encapsulation would be. And this is a pleasure to do for an inspector to get in. You've got plenty of height. It's all clean. And the way they do this is they actually close off the air vents that are in the foundation so that there is no outside air circulating through here. and they run the plastic or the vapor barrier all the way up the walls. It's all sealed very tightly, and it works out very well for keeping the mold and everything down. We're also looking, of course, for any kind of settling. So here's a good, cracks in the foundation. It's settling, a stair-step crack. Now, this would certainly be something that we'd be looking at as well, going through that crawl space. Again, it again depends on if this is visible on the exterior. If you have a brick exterior, where you would see the same crack all the way through, then perhaps when you're showing the home, it may be a good idea to consult with a structural engineer before you even consult with us as inspectors. If it's a major problem, that engineer can give you the scope of work that would need to remedy that situation. Random little small cracks are not that big of a deal, but something this large is something that we probably should pay attention to. Yeah, so besides that, some of the folks that are living there, will be things that are living there in the crawl space that we come across, mites, rats, possums, squirrels, raccoons, and snakes, to name a few. There's all kinds of stuff down there. And if it's kind of damp and dark, that's where they like to hang out. So, we go on in. I can just share with you a quick personal story about a home down in the 4th Ward, actually a duplex down there that I did several years ago. And I noticed that in the kitchen, the floor of the cabinet in the kitchen, which located at the back of the unit, had rotted away. So that was okay, when you get into the crawl, let's have a look at that from underneath and see how bad the structure might have deteriorated. So when I got into the crawl, I had my mask and my goggles and everything else on. I was ready to go, and there was no plastic barrier. There was no on the floor, and kind of had to go through the dirt, and it was very close and very tight. Probably right about the 24-inch height. So basically dragged myself through the dirt with my toes and my elbows. And I got about halfway back toward the area that I needed to go to. And I got stuck with the cast iron plumbing was right up on my back, and it was too tight to go any further. But I had about another 30 feet that I needed to get back to the kitchen area. And that's when I heard kind of a noise, some hissing and some noises back there. So I took my flashlight and shone it up ahead, and there I saw like 4 pairs of eyes looking back at me. And it turned out to be a family of raccoons, and they can be pretty aggressive, especially when they're little ones that are around. And of course I was stuck, and it took me a couple of minutes to stop hyperventilating and kind of I couldn't turn around. So I just kind of had to back up out of there, and I did that, and I rolled out of the crawl space covered in all this muck from the dirt and spider webs and all that stuff. And of course the buyer was standing right there, and he looked totally horrified to see me. And he like, are things that bad underneath there? And I said, no, we need some repair, but the way you're going to have to handle this is get it from the top. You're going to go ahead and take out that rotted cabinet. You're going to cut out the floor, and you're going to get somebody to come in and remove the critters from in there, and then you repair it. He bought the duplex, held on to it for it's been about 10 years now. He just sold it last year. Had a wonderful profit, and really appreciated that extra effort and the information we could give him. So, what happened then is furnaces were installed as well in crawl spaces. So we can see a horizontal unit right here above the dirt. If it wasn't strung up like this with this bracket, then it would need to be up on some cement block or a pad of some kind. You don't want the actual furnace sitting in the dirt, being that it can and does rust. I mentioned that there were moisture in the soil. We can see, a good amount here. The issue here, of course, would be that leaning post support over on the left here. This couldn't have been all that old. because we do have the furnace in there. And here we have another one where actually it had been dug out. You can see that regular furnace right here, standard furnace, metal vent right here. Here's our condensate pump, but you can see that there's water down here. So they actually built a little retaining wall around the area where they're going to set the furnace, perhaps hoping that it would hold back the water, because you can see the dirt is way up here and up here. This little thing right down here is, of course, a sump pump. So whatever water was coming down in here is going to go into that sump pump and then be ejected on out to the exterior. So yeah, just because you have a retaining wall even inside the crawl space doesn't mean you're going to be able to protect that furnace. So we want to make sure that we do get a sump pump installed in there. You can see also here on the cement block wall that moisture is constantly there as well. Yeah, so if we have some sagging floors, especially in the older homes, it's really common. And this is the way extra supports can be installed. As long as they're installed with proper bases or foundations, they can provide the support that we need. If you're just going to have some willy-nilly stuff stuck in there that you'll see in just a moment, it's going to continue to sag over time. And really, when you do a nice renovation on the inside of the home, we see these terrific renos these days. They look wonderful on the inside, 15 different shades of gray these days. You know, you're looking at all of that stuff, and then we get into the crawl space and we find that they're not supported very well, and that we know that over time there's going to be some settling, and it's going to be very heartbreaking and disappointing for your buyers. Stuff that happens. I mean, look at this. The actual beam was removed from here. This whole side is not supported any longer. They've got a beam, over here, but there's nothing supporting it. Over here behind this brick pier is a metal adjustable pier to hold up this particular beam on this side. But this is an issue, and perhaps from the top, you wouldn't have been able to tell that. There are not too many buyers that, through all my years that I was an inspector, I believe I had 2 that actually came with me into the crawl space and literally crawled with me. Both of them in Decatur, funny enough. But yeah, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that we have to be looking out for. I mean, here we see, hey, what a nice plastic barrier we've got. The vapor barrier is down. We've still got mold here. And we've got this part of the home supported by these 2 masonry blocks. They're not even level themselves. This side over here, they just forgot about. No support here at all. You actually see some ductwork running through here that doesn't have any insulation on it, but this is the kind of thing we'd see. And if you look down over here on the blockwork again, you can see that it's darkened out. It's got moisture showing there. This is a whole lot of just cement block, no actual foundation to them, just basically shifting in here. They have a wood block right here and a wood 4x4 support right there. And they put the jacks in there to hold up this beam that's running from front to rear in this particular crawl space right here. Let's look at a couple of other little examples. Just keep on putting stuff in there until we can get the floor to where it needs to be up top. So this is pretty much just a temporary thing. We need to have something there that's permanent, that can hold those floors up for a good length of time. We can see our insulation there. And on this one, you've got a standard little jack right here, even a piece of 2x. We're in the dirt. This side is not supported at all. Needs some repair work done there. And when it gets to really be rotted, we see this sort of stuff happening where the beams are actually so deteriorated that the wood actually gets crushed with the weight coming down from the top onto this jack right here. And so we're going to need some replacement here. And there are all kinds of different kinds of materials that are used to support floors. There was a home over also in the 4th Ward where a buyer had requested us to come in, hired us to come in and do the inspection. We did it. It was a total renovation and an add-on. The biggest issue there was that there was actually no access to the crawl space. And so we requested to get access by having the builder or the renovator come in and provide that access to the crawl. It didn't happen for several weeks, so they had to kick the closing down a couple of times down the road. But the whole thing was that she was determined to buy that house at that location. And that's how it is when folks really do fall in love with the home. So she hung in there, and we told them we would, come back for free once access was given, and we did. And what we found there was so much that the bill for fixing everything was going to be at approximately $30,000. And just think about if she hadn't really waited and hung in there and insisted to get that access, what would have happened years down the line when she wanted to sell that home, and then perhaps the next buyer would want to get in there and wouldn't have that access. And then she would be looking at that expensive repair of her own. So, stuff happens, and people use different methods of holding up floors, and we've just seen some of those. My favorite is this one right here, which is a great ad for Rubbermaid, actually. Think about it. This was underneath a bathroom that we did, and the floor of the shower the shower pan had rotted away. And so they came in and they replaced the shower, did a really nice job with all the new ceramic tile and everything else. And then had methods to shore up the floor, thinking probably nobody's going to go up underneath there and check and see what we did. But this is what's actually holding up the subfloor underneath the home. So that's kind of given you a little bit of a background on what it looks like, what we find there in the crawl spaces. So we're at the end of the little physical slide presentation here. And I'm hoping that I could answer some